I'm Connor Wold, and welcome back to another bonus episode of Old's Oscar Countdown, in what will inevitably be the most busy week in Oscar nominations in this channel. Probably history. We're doing multiple videos. Not only a couple days ago did I give my Golden Globes reactions, but before that I gave my Golden Globes predictions. But now you're going to hear a big video on the directors, the producers, and the Screen Actors Guilds, and what that means for the Oscars. Then I'm going to be doing a first in the channel's history by predicting what I think is going to win at the Critics' Choice, and then give some reactions for that award show. There's a lot of stuff happening over these next couple weeks, right as we prepare before the ultimate Oscar nominations. So that's what this channel is for, is to keep you up to date on all these award shows and these nominations and what they mean ultimately for the big one there, the Oscars. So in this video, I'm going to be talking about my thoughts on the Screen Actors Guild Award nominations, the Directors Guild Award nominations, and the Producers Guild Award nominations, all which happened over the past couple days here, with the majority of the video talking about the Screen Actors Guild just because they have the most overlap with a bunch of different categories at the Oscars, whereas, say, the Directors Guild I'll just briefly mention here at the end because it has a little bit of course, indication of what's going to happen at the Oscars for Best Director, but that's only one category, and we can sort of briefly talk about that. And this video is going to explain to you what these categories mean for the Oscars. Do you need to follow these nominations 5 for 5? Who should you put out? Who should you not put in? What are my thoughts and analysis? Give you some stats to back it up as well. That's what we do here on Old Oscar Countdown. So if you appreciate these up-to-date videos and these analysis, please do subscribe to the channel and like the video. That stuff does happen. But of course, I always love to hear your thoughts in the comments down below. So please do comment. That's my favorite thing about making these videos, is to hear your guys' thoughts. So please do that. Now jumping into things, I'll start off with the big one, the Screen Actors Guild Awards, and my reactions to each of the different categories. So I'm going to start off by talking about the Best Lead Actor category, which was probably the most obvious category, and I think the easiest category to predict out of the 4 acting categories. Right now we have a pretty clear top 4, that being Colin Farrell for The Banshees of Inisherin, Brendan Fraser for The Whale, Austin Butler for Elvis, and Bill Nighy for Living. These guys have been showing up everywhere. BAFTA long list, Critics' Choice, getting in at SAG here. They're sort of a very clear top 4, and those guys are going to get in. But in this category, there really is an unknown number 5. I think a lot of people maybe begrudgingly have put Tom Cruise or Hugh Jackman, or in my case I have Paul Mescal, sort of in that 5th slot because they're unsure as to where it's going to ultimately go. You know, you could say Tom Cruise, but I think Top Gun Maverick has sort of fallen out of the Best Picture race in terms of potential winner. I still think it's going to get nominated, but it's always seemed to me like a movie that will get in for picture and then a bunch of tech categories. Tom Cruise hasn't really been campaigning. He's been shooting Mission Impossible, and his omission here, and even something like Top Gun Maverick's omission in Best Film Ensemble, I think has sort of killed his chances. You can go with someone like Adam Sandler, who did get nominated here for Hustle. However, this seems to me like a very obvious kind of a SAG type of a pick. The Screen Actors Guild is a really massive group of members, even more than the Academy, so they usually have more populist taste and nominate movies that are easily available and easy to watch. Movies like Hustle on Netflix was widely seen, so I think that makes sense why Adam Sandler was nominated there, and he's a well-liked guy. However, the movie as a whole hasn't been strongly campaigned, and I don't think it will actually get any other nominations at the Oscars if it were to get anything at all. Still a possibility, but I have Sandler sort of on the outside still. You could also go with someone like a Jeremy Pope for The Inspection, who's been campaigning a lot, and that movie has been sort of following the traditional path, although just doesn't have maybe glowing reviews except for him and his performance, and he still is a newcomer, and the Oscars don't totally sort of like to nominate newcomers always. However, I do think they're going to nominate a newcomer in Paul Mescal for After Sun, just because he didn't get nominated here, but he did get in at Critics' Choice. He did make the BAFTA long list, and After Sun is a more critically acclaimed movie than even something like Hustle. And I do think that plus the fact that he has some of the international support, being an international actor, but then also has recently been gaining some more American support, being announced to be the lead in Richard Linklater's sort of 20-year project, Merrily We Roll Along, but then also being announced as the lead of the Gladiator sequel. So he's really sort of booking some big projects and seems to be like a Star is Born here. So I think that sort of inaugural nomination is clear here for After Sun in that final up in the air slot. Then Best Lead Actress, Michelle Williams here missing was the big surprise. However, I still do think that she will get nominated in this category, but her miss here indicates to me that The Fabelmans Best Picture chances have definitely waned. I mean, we've seen that in missing out in a lot of the BAFTA long lists and missing out on a key couple of guilds. It doesn't have this widespread support like other frontrunners have in the past, like a Nomadland or The Power of the Dog. It's definitely been slipping in that regard. I still have Spielberg to win for Best Director because it's such a personal movie to him, and I don't think I see a clear number two, and he's so well regarded within the Academy and within the industry as a whole that if he wants it, which he seems like he does, I think he'll ultimately get that Best Director prize, even if the film doesn't do so well. That being said, I still think The Fabelmans will be a movie that definitely resonates with the Academy more than any other branch because it's about making movies, because it's a very personal movie, and because Spielberg is very well regarded within the Academy. And let's not forget, Michelle Williams has missed out on SAG nominations and still got in at the Oscars. In 2010, she got nominated for Blue Valentine at the Oscars despite not getting a SAG nomination. So this could still very much happen. So for me, the sort of top three, top four of this category, similar to the lead actor category, is pretty somewhat solidified. I think Michelle Williams gets in. I think Cate Blanchett gets in. I think Michelle Yeoh gets in. I think I have Viola Davis in. Woman King hasn't been performing very well, as I sort of predicted in a lot of the guilds. However, Viola Davis has been showing up everywhere, so I can't sort of ignore that anymore. I mean, she has got in Critics' Choice. She got in the BAFTA long list. She got in here. She's just been showing up everywhere like a staple acting nominee would. So those are sort of my top four-ish. And then the fifth slot here at SAG, they went with Ana de Armas for Blonde. Now I think that's a sort of typical SAG nomination. Blonde, another Netflix movie, so it was very widely seen with high distribution, which helps in the SAG awards because the group is so large. She also, is playing a prolific icon, and the SAG Awards, when we're talking about the nominees, oftentimes it goes to actors who give big performances, whereas the Oscars, when they have surprises, they'll often go for actors that give more subtle performances, like a Lakeith Stanfield in Judas and the Black Messiah, or a Leslie Manville in Phantom Thread, or a Marina de Taviro in Roma. There are oftentimes these sort of surprise nominations in those fourth slot that we see on Oscar morning. They come from more subtle performances, whereas SAG, they'll nominate Idris Elba in Beast of No Nation, they'll nominate Emily Blunt in A Quiet Place, a little bit more mainstream movies and also bigger type performances, and Blonde sort of fits that sort of mold very well. It sort of confirms my belief that I think Blonde will still get some nomination, whether that be in makeup and hairstyling or costume design, or still could get in here, but for me it seems like a classic SAG kind of a nomination versus one that would actually get nominated at the Oscars. So I don't think Anna gets in just because I think Blonde is too divisive of a movie for it to ultimately give her a nomination. So with that fifth slot, you can give it to Margot Robbie for Babylon, which didn't get nominated here, but she got in a Critics' Choice, big sort of performance. Or you give it to someone like a Danielle Deadwyler for Till, who's probably in my fifth slot right now. Now, while Till isn't as well liked as Babylon as a movie, if you've seen Babylon, you know that Margot Robbie really is the same amount of a lead, in my opinion, as someone like a Brad Pitt is. Yeah, Brad Pitt's in supporting actor and she's in lead. There are moments of the film where we really sort of don't go away with her character versus someone like a Danielle Deadwyler, in which she is in almost every frame of Till. She gives sort of real central performance. And then, of course, she got in here at SAG, so has that boost. So it's still sort of I think the fourth, fifth slot are a little bit more moldable in this category versus, say, like the clear four in Best Lead Actor, but I still think sort of top four I still think Michelle Williams, Viola Davis, Cate Blanchett, Michelle Yeoh, and then that fifth slot of either. Still, I think Margot Robbie for Babylon or Danielle Deadwyler for Till are the sort of top two potential contenders. Ultimately, for me, I'll probably go with Danielle Deadwyler right now. Then Best Supporting Actor. No real shock here for me, just because there seems to be a clear sort of top three, being the two men from Banshees of Inisherin and then Ki Kwan from Everything Everywhere All at Once. I mentioned on the Globe's reactions video that I think Ki Kwan has sort of taken the Best Supporting Actor trophy and has run with it already. I think he's going to win at the Oscars because the Banshees men sort of are both being nominated, and I think there's going to be a little bit of a split between the two. So those top three are pretty solidified, and then Paul Dano from The Fabelmans was a major contender, which I predicted. And then also, if you remember back in my original Supporting Actor predictions video back in November, I predicted Eddie Redmayne getting nominated for SAG. I said, watch out for this. This is the type of performance that gets nominated. It will be a contender, and that's why I predicted it all the way back then. Now we're in a situation where, you could go 5 for 5 in this category, but, there's still, I think, a contender for that fifth slot. So for me, there's a clear top three, being the two men from Banshees and Ki Kwan. And then the fourth slot, I still go with Paul Dano for The Fabelmans. just because he's really almost a co-lead of the movie. When you think about the movie, he's one of the main characters. He's a well-respected actor in a movie that I still think will be well-liked, and even though the Fabelmans sort of disappointed by missing out on Michelle Williams, Paul Dano still got in over Judd Hirsch, his co-star. So some people thought if it's either both the Fabelmans actors or none of them, but it seems like here Paul Dano getting in without a co-star being nominated in Judd Hirsch shows signs of strength of just him personally. So I think that's sort of my top four. And then that fifth slot's really tough. Like I said, you can go with Eddie Redmayne for The Good Nurse, but you know, SAG does very well with Netflix. Like as I mentioned, the distribution of those movies are very easy to watch, so a lot of people see them, so they want to nominate. Versus movies that maybe they haven't seen, like a Woman Talking, or not as many people have seen. And Eddie Redmayne could still get nominated, but I do have some concerns that Good Nurse is just not super critically well liked, and that will hurt him at the Oscars, which is why we see, actors like Jared Leto in House of Gucci or The Little Things. Good performances in not super well critically loved movies don't end up getting nominated at the Oscars because of that sort of a bias. We have to be aware of that with Eddie Redmayne for The Good Nurse. Even say you go to someone like a Brian Tyree Henry for Causeway. He did get nominated, at Critics' Choice, but he didn't get the BAFTA shortlist, and I'm just not sure enough people have seen that movie, so I'm very sort of cautious about that. And then maybe it goes to someone like a Brad Pitt for Babylon, because I think he has this sort of movie star status, and this Babylon movie is a movie about Hollywood, so I do think that will appeal more so to the Academy versus any other branch, and it's going to be, I think, a Best Picture nominee and a well-liked movie. So a well-liked actor in a well-liked movie, and he is in quite a bit of the movie for a supporting actor contender, so he could get in. But this sort of fifth slot for supporting actor I think is really up in the air, but I'm pretty confident in the top three, and then probably Paul Dano. But then also let's not forget about Judd Hirsch. If they really like the Fabelmans, they may nominate him too. It'd be kind of strange to see two actors from the Banshees of Inisherin and then two actors from the Fabelmans taking up 4 slots in this category, and then maybe even Jamie Lee Curtis and Stephanie Hsu in for Everything Everywhere All at Once. That would be very rare. I'm sort of leaning against that, so why I think probably Daniel's going to be the only supporting actor nominee from the Fabelmans. So probably Brad Pitt is in my 5th slot right now, but definitely subject to change. Then the Best Supporting Actress category, out of all the acting categories, is definitely the most up in the air. There's really only one nominee that I can say is definitely for sure, and that's someone like a Carrie Condon for the Banshees of Inisherin, who's been showing up everywhere. That being said, I don't even think she's going to win. I have some reservations regarding that, and I actually think Angela Bassett will probably win the Critics' Choice Awards and maybe start to develop herself here. So if there's one sort of guaranteed nominee, I think that's Carrie Condon. Then the sort of number 2 that's probably pretty solid is Angela Bassett. She's been getting in everywhere in terms of nominations, Critics' Choice, BAFTA. Here, there's just a little bit of concern on my regard to go, are we really going to give this performance from a Marvel movie? The Oscars have very much been anti-Marvel, really only nominating Black Panther that one big time, but even still have never nominated a Marvel movie for a performance. So is this the first one to do so? It would be interesting to see if that actually were to happen, but she's been getting in everywhere. So there's a little bit of hesitation in my regard just because that's never happened before, but she's been getting in everywhere she needs to be and is a real contender to win. So I do think she will probably get nominated for supporting actress. Then that sort of 3rd slot, I'd probably go with Jamie Lee Curtis for Everything Everywhere All at Once. There's a risk that Stephanie Hsu sort of splits the vote and both of them don't get nominated, but there's also a chance, of course, that both of them do get nominated. She's the big name from the movie and has been campaigning very hard for this performance, so I still think that pushes her over the edge. So those are my sort of top 3. But then the 4th and 5th slots, I think, are truly, truly up in the air. There's probably 7 or 8 performances which I could genuinely think and see a world in which they get nominated. You could go with Stephanie Hsu, and that would indicate the support of Everything Everywhere All at Once. You could go with the other SAG nominee, The Whale, Hong Shao, which we know a lot of people have been seeing the movie because of Brendan Fraser, and she gives a very emotional performance in that movie. But really, the way I look at these sort of 4th and 5th slots is they're up in the air. Why? Well, because if you look at the supporting categories within the past 5 years for both the actor category and the actress category, they never go 5 for 5. The SAG never repeats 5 for 5 in these supporting categories with the Oscars because there's too much variety, there's too many different options, and we see sort of over and over again the international branch of the Academy really showing up within the Academy and nominating a lot of these international nominees like a Maria de Taviro or even a Leslie Manville. We've seen these sort of more British or Irish actors or Mexican actors get nominated in surprise acting nominations versus, say, the Americans like a Hong Chow or a Stephanie Hsu. As a matter of fact, if you look at the supporting actor category over the past 5 years, they have an average of 3.4 out of the 5 of the SAG nominees ended up repeating at the Oscars. But if you look at the supporting actress category over the past 5 years, there is an average of 3 out of 5 of the supporting actress nominees at SAG ultimately getting nominated at the Oscars. 3 out of 5, that's the average. So, if you look at my sort of thinking, Angela Bassett's probably locked, Carrie Condon's probably locked, and then probably Jamie Lee Curtis as the 3. Now, if you're a big fan of Everything Everywhere All at Once and you think that's going to do very well, then you can put in Stephanie Hsu. But I'd be very, cautious if you also pick something like a Hong Chow in the 5th slot. SAG very rarely, at least in the past 5 years, have gone 5 for 5. They average 3 out of 5 getting nominated. Why? Because I think there's going to be some support from the international branch of the Academy, which may help movies like Triangle of Sadness for Dolly De Leon. I think Jessie Buckley for Women Talking is not out of the race yet. She had that extra support and got that surprise nomination for The Lost Daughter. There's support with her within the Academy in a movie that I think is going to get nominated for Best Picture. So if it's going to get nominated for Best Picture, I'd be surprised if it gets picture and then screenplay and then maybe score. It should get maybe a little bit more of an overperformance on Oscar morning. That could be something like a Jessie Buckley. But also, I don't think we should forget about an actress like Nina Hoss in Tar, who has a strong international support. And Tar, I think, is going to be a movie that does very well within the Academy. That's sort of prestigious kind of a movie I think they would appreciate more than any other group. So ultimately, come Oscar night, I may have that sort of top 3, and then Nina Hoss and Dolly De Leon, or Jessie Buckley and Nina Hoss, or some, the international support there. I'd be okay if you put someone like a Stephanie Hsu in, and then someone like a Jessie Buckley, but I would be cautious to let you know that an average of 3 out of 4 of the SAG repeats with the Oscars, so don't blindly go 5 for 5 for the Oscars, particularly in these supporting categories. It is very rare. Then Best Ensemble. This used to be a category that was very predictive of what would win Best Picture at the Oscars, and it is still used as a sort of stalwart for Best Picture because the Best Ensemble award, of course, doesn't happen at the Oscars. It's not a category, so that's the sort of clearest example. That being said, in the past few years, the winner of this category and even the nominees of this category have diverged quite significantly from Best Picture, and it's not really a reliable precursor anymore. It's still interesting, and still oftentimes we do see some overlap, but it's not a big award that you need to win. But we've seen movies like Parasite win here and then ultimately win a Best Picture, and this was sort of their big industry award, so it still shows signs of support. But in terms of the nominations, the sort of 2 big takeaways I learned from this category was that Babylon and Women Talking, their inclusion here in Ensemble is very interesting. Because on first hand, when I first looked at it, I went, hey, that shows signs for support from the actors. It doesn't matter that Brad Pitt or Margot Robbie didn't get nominated for individual awards because Babylon got in for Ensemble, so it shows acting support. Same thing with Women Talking, which I think does sort of make a little bit of sense, but also I also did some digging. I looked at the past 10 years, and I looked at movies that got nominated for Best Ensemble at SAG that didn't get any other individual acting awards. So I looked at Black Panther, or Don't Look Up, or Parasite, movies that got in for Ensemble that did not get another individual acting award at SAG. I then thought, okay, well, did any of those movies end up getting an individual acting award nominee? And no, none of them did. Don't Look Up didn't, Black Panther didn't, Parasite didn't. At least historically, that hasn't happened. It maybe is the wrong conclusion to say, hey, Women Talking didn't get in anywhere, but still got in for Ensemble, so there's support for acting, therefore Jessie Buckley will get in. You can't necessarily make that conclusion just because historically that hasn't been the conclusion that's always happened. Now, of course, the obvious being that Black Panther never really had a contender in the same way Jessie Buckley for Women Talking, or Brad Pitt for Babylon, or Margot Robbie for Babylon. These movies, Parasite and Black Panther and Don't Look Up, never really had contenders and quote-unquote missed at SAG and then still get on for Ensemble. So it's kind of a hard comparison. The initial instinct, I think, is still somewhat right, but I do think you should be warned to know that historically, movies that got nominated for Ensemble and no other acting nominations, even something like Crazy Rich Asians, movies like that haven't historically gotten nominations, individual nominations at the Oscars. So do be careful of that. I'm not saying don't predict Brad Pitt or Jessie Buckley. I still might do it anyways, but historically that hasn't happened, so it's hard to see what that exactly means. The real sort of loser of the night was Glass Onion missing out on Ensemble and Janelle Monáe. We thought that if that movie sort of did well here, it could be a potential Best Picture contender. I think its chances are pretty much completely dead. I'd only expect it to get nominated for a screenplay. Now, talking about the PGA Awards, the sort of top 10 for Best Picture, oftentimes the winner of this ends up winning the Best Picture, but the nominations are also super important. So starting out with the movies that missed, the two big ones in my opinion were Babylon and Women Talking. You could also say something like All Quiet on the Western Front, but the Producers Guild, mainly the Producers Guild of America, so they don't really like to nominate international films, so I don't think this was necessarily a miss from All Quiet on the Western Front's purpose, but Babylon and Women Talking, they were definitely misses. Now, starting off with Babylon, obviously this is not a good sign for the film, although I'm not panicking. This is not going to make Best Picture, because ultimately when we look at the Producers Guild, what they always like to do is frankly reward movies that did well at the box office, that were sort of more mainstream. They've nominated superhero movies like Deadpool and Wonder Woman and Black Panther. They like to nominate sort of bigger, more mainstream movies. So when you have a movie like Babylon releasing late, which did very poorly at the box office, not even, like a situation like Nightmare Alley, for example, didn't get PGA last year, but then ultimately did get the Oscars. Now, Nightmare Alley was a bit of a box office disappointment, big budget kind of a movie for adults, didn't do so well. Similarly with Babylon, although Babylon did even worse than Nightmare Alley at the box office. So you can sort of maybe explain that away, Babylon's miss there, but it's still, disappointing that it didn't get in, and notable because the Producers Guild are so accurate with the Ultimate Best Picture lineup. Now, they never really go sort of perfect. It's hard to tell, because in past years, if you remember, the Oscars sometimes only nominated 8 movies or 9 movies, where the Producers Guild almost always nominated the 10. So it's kind of hard to compare from year to year, but the Producers Guild, they usually miss a couple of movies most years. For example, last year they missed Nightmare Alley. A couple of years before that, they missed, or the year before that, they missed The Father. Things like that, they do sort of don't always get perfect 10 for 10 lineup with the Oscars Best Picture, so we have to remember that. And with both Babylon and Women Talking, the sort of two things that they're holding on to is that SAG Ensemble for best ensemble, SAG nomination for Best Ensemble. That's what they're holding on to right now. They're really sort of struggling, and they're definitely in that sort of 9-10 competing for those last 2 slots for sure. So Babylon, I'm not super concerned about, mostly because it has the technical support. It has been getting in at the guilds. I think it's getting in for cinematography, potentially. I think it could get in for production designer, costume designer, score. It does have that sort of technical support, so I'm not too worried about it from there. I think some of the technical branches of the Academy can maybe overperform and get a movie like Babylon the nomination. But with a movie like Women Talking, that missing out, I think, is actually a little bit more of cause for concern, because this is a movie that totally relied on the above-the-line support. This was a movie that needed the acting nominations and the screenplay nomination and the director. It seems most likely to miss out on director. It hasn't got any really acting support except for that ensemble nomination at SAG, but didn't get any individual awards. We thought maybe Jessie Buckley and Claire Foy would get in. Neither of them right now are looking likely. So we're at this point where Women Talking, how can you say it's a stronger movie than, say, The Whale or even Glass Onion? We think it's going to get nominated for screenplay, but is that it? Probably score, probably no other technical nominations. So are you really going to say, oh, for some reason I like Women Talking because it's going to getting in for picture because it also has screenplay? Well, then if you're saying that, then you may also have to predict Jessie Buckley and then definitely getting in for best score. Because right now it's definitely in conversation with something like The Whale, which at the very least we know has a actor nomination, and then also will most likely get for screenplay. So it's in that contention right now. Woman Talking not getting in here, I think, is a stronger sign, and I think that movie sort of bet to not be released wide until very, very late and not have anyone really see the movie seems to be a poor strategy. It was a frontrunner early on and has now just been falling and falling and falling. Woman Talking. Hard to know if it's going to get in for Best Picture. We'll see, but definitely a disappointing day today. Now talking about what actually did make the Producers Guild. First of all, Glass Onion, Knives Out got nominated. This was not a surprise for me to get nominated here just because the first Knives Out also got nominated, and the movie did very well in this 1-week theatrical run, and then was a very sort of hot topic button movie when it came out on Netflix. A lot of people were watching and seeing it, so more of a mainstream movie which appeals to the Producers Guild's tastes. Personally, I don't think Glass Onion has a chance at getting in for Best Picture, just because it's a movie that was released by Netflix that underperformed at SAG when all the other Netflix movies, The Good Nurse, Hustle, they all did very well, versus a movie like Glass Onion didn't do well at SAG. So in my opinion, there was really no excuse for a movie like Glass Onion to underperform at SAG, yet it still did. It didn't get in Janelle Monáe, it didn't get in for Best Ensemble. So yes, it got in here for Best Film here at the Producers Guild, which is a strong sign of support. But if you're not predicting Janelle Monáe, which I'm not, If you're not predicting it for, say, score or production design, I think you should be hard-pressed to predict it for Best Picture, and I don't think it gets in. This is more of a case that I think they like the first movie. It was a big hit on Netflix and in theaters, that sort of dual model. I think the Producers Guild wants to reward that. Similarly, with another nomination in Black Panther Wakanda Forever, I think they want to reward that, like they reward the first Black Panther movie. Like I mentioned, they like these superhero movies, these big box office hits, which Black Panther Wakanda Forever was. But to me, what this really shows is a sign of support for the movie overall. What this shows to me is that Angela Bassett is a strong nominee for Best Supporting Actress. She could even win, and that there's overall broad support. I was a little bit skeptical personally when it first came out. Would Black Panther really have that overall support the same way the first one did? It seems like it has. It seems like it's resonating. And I think Angela Bassett has almost a strong chance now to win for Best Supporting Actress. But frankly, I'm not ready to put that movie in for Best Picture, because when I look at my Best Picture lineup, I go, are we really going to get 3-4 movies that are technical movies in for Best Picture? Usually there's 1, maybe 2 every year. Movies like Dunkirk or Mad Max Fury Road, which don't have any acting nominations or screenplay nominations, but have such impressive technical features of the movie that they get nominated for those categories and then in for picture. Well, right now we already have 2 of those movies sort of locked in Top Gun and Avatar: The Way of Water. If you were saying Black Panther gets in for picture, do you really predict that another sort of technical award movie is going to get it in? What if you're also predicting something like All Quiet on the Western Front? Do you think 4 technical-based movies are going to get nominated? You know, Black Panther does have Angela Bassett, but it's not a screenplay nominee, it's not a director contender. It's very much a production design, costume design, score kind of movie. So it may make sense that it ultimately sneaks into that final slot, but I still have some dubious concerns over a Marvel movie, over it being a sequel. It has a lot of sort of the interesting precursors, but in terms of film, this is the big one that's made, so it's not like it's been celebrated for its overall film in many instances. Really, this is just the only instance, and it does make sense that the producers would appreciate this, so I'm not 100% confident right now that the Academy will appreciate it. For me, the interesting one is The Whale. It getting in here I thought was a really strong sign for the movie. I think this movie can definitely get in for Best Picture because it has the above the line support. It can take a slot like Women Talking, which may only get in for screenplay right now, because The Whale has at least a Brendan Fraser nomination. It could also get a Hong Chow nomination with that overperformance at SAG. I think it's going to get in for screenplay. So who's to say it's not going to get in for Best Picture? The sort of reasoning why you think The Whale would be supported here over a movie like Babylon is because it sort of has done well at the box office, of course, relative to its small budget, but also because it's followed a very traditional platform theatrical release. In an era where we're seeing The Banshees of Inisherin in theaters for 2 weeks and then immediately on Disney Plus and Hulu and HBO Max. In that world, The Whale is actually very sort of more typical. It's doing the traditional start off with a few small theaters, build up, get word of mouth, stay in theaters. Darren Aronofsky's putting on his Instagram and whatnot that this will not be released on streaming anytime soon. So there's a sort of real commitment to the theatrical model, which the producers at the end of the day do very well in. That's where they make most of their money. So I think there's an appreciation for that theatrical model within the producers, and The Whale is following that model. So that could be the explanation as to why this movie has gotten nominated here and has done well, but I ultimately do think it is a stronger sign of the movie as a whole, and it should be a serious contender for this sort of 10th slot for Best Picture. So I'm going to have to make some serious, considerations. Do I really think Babylon and Women Talking are still getting in? Do I want to ignore this completely, or should I actually look at the facts? I sort of commend you to do a similar thing. It's going to be tough right now, those sort of final slots, debating whether it's All Quiet on the Western Front, Triangle, Sadness, The Whale, Babylon, Women Talking. Those are sort of those 5 slots. I don't think Glass Onion can get in. Black Panther maybe. Woman King I think is completely out of the race. Those are sort of the movies that are contending, but it'll be fun to see what gets nominated at the Oscars. So now at the end of the video, the Directors Guild of America Reactions. Essentially all you need to know is that this guild lines up 4 of the 5 nominees with the Oscars almost every year. If you look at the past 9 years, 8 out of the last 9 years, the Guild has predicted 4 out of the 5 eventual Oscar nominees for director every year. Literally 8 out of the 9, it goes 4 for 5, 4 for 5, 4 for 5. Only, Gareth Davis will miss out for Lion, or Taika Waititi will get nominated at DGA and then won't get nominated at the Oscars. Very rarely do they go even 3 for 5. I mean, 8 out of the last 9 years. It's not an average of 4 to 5. It's literally 4 to 5. That number specifically every year. Never 5 out of 5, never 3 out of 5, 4 out of 5. So what I think is probably a smart thing to do is look at this 5 lineup and pick one director that you don't think is going to get in. The obvious one for me to take out is Joseph Kosinski for Top Gun Maverick. Why Top Gun Maverick? This is ultimately the Directors Guild of America. Top Gun Maverick is a very sort of pro-America movie, action movie. He hasn't got nominated at Critics' Choice either, so he doesn't have that overall broad support. It was kind of a surprise to see him get nominated here. So he could definitely overlap at the Oscars, but for me, the sort of clear three at least would be the Daniels, Martin McDonagh, Steven Spielberg, and then the fourth one being Todd Field for Tar. I think the Academy's going to really like Tar, and he's been showing up everywhere, even including here. So those are sort of the five. And then when you're making your Oscar predictions, I'd probably suggest taking out either Todd Field or Joseph Kosinski, and then putting in whoever you want. James Cameron could be in, but I was kind of disappointed that he didn't get in for the DGA, the Directors Guild of America. I feel like they'd appreciate him a little bit more than even the Academy. I actually think right now it's probably going to go to an international director, and that could be something like an Edward Berger for All Quiet on the Western Front. I actually think Park Chan-wook may be my final pick for Decision to Leave, because he has a lot of respect as a director, and that's a very well-directed movie. So don't rule out Park Chan-wook out either. But definitely that for fifth slot is either going to go to, I think, an American auteur in James Cameron or Damien Chazelle, or an international auteur in Edward Berger for All Quiet on the Western Front, or Park Chan-wook for Decision to Leave, because we've seen these international directors do very well within the director's branch. But that's about it, guys. I hope you enjoyed the video. Make sure you comment below. Let me know your thoughts on all the SAG, PGA, DGA, all that stuff. And subscribe to the channel so you don't miss my Critics' Choice predictions video, and then eventually my Critics' Choice reactions video. Lots of fun stuff. If you appreciate the videos, do give a like. That stuff always helps. But that's about it. Until next time, stay tuned.